Okay. Hi guys, this is Miss Meyer, and today we are going to talk about our new nation today on the Miss Meyer Show. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to review the whole new nation, and I'm going to separate it into two videos because there is so much information, and it really is, and I won't, there's no way that I could finish it all in one video. So the first thing we're talking about is the Articles of the Confederation. Now, once our new nation was formed, our leaders decided that we needed to have some sort of governance, something to govern us. I mean, we were now away from Great Britain, we were independent, and we needed some sort of rules. The problem is that the people of America, these colonists, were so fearful that things were going to go back to the way they were when George was in power, that they didn't want to have a central government. They were really, really fearful of a central government. But they knew that they needed something. So the Articles of Confederation were written during the Revolutionary War at the Second Continental Congress. It was made up of 65 representatives from the 13 colonies. They included Ben Franklin, Sam Adams, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, all kinds of people. They met from May 10th in 1775 to March 1st of 1781. Now, they weren't constantly there, like every day, day in and day out, but they met periodically through those days. The articles went into effect in 1781 after the war was completely finished, and all 13 states had finally approved them. And what they did is they set up a national government, and it consisted of a single House of Congress in which each state would have one vote. So they did not set up like a presidency or anything of that sense yet. The first way of government that we had was not your three separate branches. The first form of government we had with the Second Continental Congress really only gave us one Congress. And rather like we have today, we have the House of Representatives and the Senate, in which they both are part of the legislative branch. The first form of government we had was a legislative branch with just one house, and every state, no matter how big or how small, got one vote. So there were 13 delegates, and each delegate got one vote. And that was our first, Articles of Confederation, our first form of government. So in creating the Articles, like I said, many Americans were very fearful about this strong government because of things that they suffered under King George. They were really, really fearful to put some one person into power. So the Articles gave more powers to the state and not to one single person. It prohibited, meaning it did not allow the national government. It said no government taxes, no government-owned lands being sold to individual settlers, no laws being given out as, you have to follow them. In order to make an amendment or a law, the government had to get consent from all the states. It was just, they were really, really scared of being treated the way they were under King George. So they put all of these things into place so that they could prevent the United States from having one single person in power to rule over them all. So that's the reason that we gave Congress and the states so much individual power. Well, the problem happened because we started to see weaknesses. This Articles of Confederation did not address other key issues. For example, we didn't have a central government. We did not have foreign countries didn't know how to make treaties with us. Do they have to go to each individual colony, or state? Who do they talk to? Who's the person in charge? We didn't have any ability to collect taxes, therefore we couldn't pay our soldiers who fought in the American Revolution. We did not have taxes, so we could not pay to build roads or schools or hospitals or anything like that, or to improve anything. We couldn't pay for the war. We couldn't pay France back because we did not have that ability to collect taxes. Now, two other things that we're going to talk about during this time also is that we have lots of people who are here in, the 13 colonies, and we continue to grow as a nation. So we have to make more room. So they passed two accomplishments, two land ordinances that were pretty big accomplishments during the Confederation government. There are the Land Ordinance of 1787 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. They sound really familiar, and they pretty much, really similar, and they pretty much are. The difference is that the Land Ordinance of 1785, it was meant to organize the new lands that we gained after the Revolution west of the Appalachian Mountains. And it said that the Western territories would become states, and they would gain control of the land in the Ohio River Valley. They would become the states when they had enough people living there. They would be known as territories until then, but when they had enough people living in those territories, they could apply for statehood. The Northwest Ordinance was similar, that it set up rules for how this new territory could become states. They had to have a certain amount of people. They had to accept not the Constitution. They had to accept the Articles of Confederation. They had to pledge their allegiance to the new United States. Certain things that they had to do. So it just set things in motion. So several other things really showed the overall weakness of the Articles of Confederation. In 1783, a group of soldiers who had fought in the American Revolution, they led an uprising known as the New Burr Mutiny. Now, mutiny means to go against. Now, these soldiers wanted to be paid for the time that they spent serving in the war. But because we could not collect taxes, we had no money to do this. So these people started to get really, really riled up. And eventually, G. Washington had to stop in and, stop it. Basically, he gave a speech saying, why we did this and, try to rile up morale and get these people not to go crazy. But people really remember this. In 1786, a group of farmers led by a guy named Daniel Shays, they started an uprising because of the high levels of debt. And this rebellion became known as Shays' Rebellion. The farmers wanted to be paid. They wanted financing. They wanted help. Great Britain did offer some monetary help for the farmers, even the ones in the colonies. Once America became independent from Great Britain, they were no longer going to offer that support. So the farmers were still looking for money, for help, for support. And the government said, how would you like us to pay you? We have no money. We can't pay our soldiers, much less you. So the farmers started to, revolt and say, we're going to burn down everything. We want to be paid. And eventually, they were defeated. But it really did make it really known, like with big bright lights, that the Articles of Confederation did have lots of weaknesses, and one being that we did need some sort of central government. Even though it was really fearful, and the word itself, central government, was scary, it was something that we needed. So in 1787, the delegates convened at the Constitutional Convention, and they did that in order to amend or change the Articles of Confederation. But when they were doing that, they saw that none of it really worked, and they replaced it completely. In 1788, after all of the states ratified it, and ratify means to agree to something, the Constitution officially replaced the Articles of Confederation. So once the Constitution became the supreme law of the land, and it is even there today, the federal government was able to enforce laws properly. They were able to regulate trade and establish 3 branches of government. I'm freezing up! Oh, I hate when I freeze up. I try not to freeze up. Sometimes I speak too quickly and the camera freezes up. We try not to do that. Okay, so the Constitution replaced the whole Articles of Confederation. and it was because of the huge weaknesses in it. Now, our Constitution gave us rights as a country in order, rights to tax, rights to trade with other countries, rights that have to deal with our military, rights that have to deal with state rights. So all of that was covered in the Constitution. So the Constitution was put in place in order to replace the Articles. It was there to improve the Articles of Confederation. So now we're going to talk about some of the things that have to do with the Articles of Confederation. Some of the things that have to do with the Constitution and representation. Now, our Constitution gave us what we have today as the separation of powers. So the separation of powers were pretty much set into place by a group called the Federalists. And the separation of powers divided the governmental power into 3 branches and gave each branch the ability to check the other branches. So basically it would say it did that so that one branch would not become too powerful. And that's called checks and balances. The American colonists were very, very fearful, like I said, of one individual becoming too powerful. So they put into place checks and balances to make sure that one branch of government, that were separation of branches, would not become too powerful. Okay? So the next couple of things that we have to talk about have to go with the whole separation of powers and checks and balances. Okay? The first one is the Great Compromise. So when our delegates at the Constitutional Convention were discussing how the government should be run, they were having a lot of issues with representation. So there were 2 plans, and then one was called the Virginia Plan and one was called the New Jersey Plan. And the Virginia Plan called for a 2-body legislative branch. Remember, in the Articles of Confederation, there was a 1-body legislative branch. The Virginia Plan called for a 2-body legislative branch. And they thought that each state's representation should be based on population. It said that the bigger states would have more delegates, the smaller states would have smaller delegates. Well, this did not appeal very much to the smaller states because it said that won't be fair because we won't get a fair voice in government because we're small and we'll only have 1 delegate compared to a big state who's going to have more delegates. Now, remember this did not have to do anything with size of the state. It had to do with the population. So the state could be tiny, 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 just have a lot of people living in it, and they would have more delegates than a bigger state with less people. And this did not apply to territories. This only applied to states. Well, because that idea wasn't that great of an idea, I mean, ideally it was, but, it did not work very well for our smaller states, there came up the people of New Jersey, well, actually the representative of New Jersey, came up with another plan that said, no, we should have 1 house of legislative branch, 1 house, and it should be like it is right now. Everyone would get 1 vote. Everybody gets a 1 vote regardless on how big they are or how small they are. Well, the bigger states said, no, we don't like that idea. And the smaller states says, well, we don't like your idea. So it was a constant going back and forth and back and forth. Well, the disagreement was resolved by the Connecticut Compromise because it was pretty much an idea from the delegate of Connecticut. But today we call it the Great Compromise. And this called for a 2-house legislative branch with the House of Representatives would be based on population and the Senate would be based with 1 vote for each state regardless of the size. Today that is what we still have. House of Representatives, each state gets a lot of representatives based on how large they are. My state that I live in now, Texas, has more representatives in the House of Representatives than Louisiana does. But in the Senate, we still have 2 representatives. Right here, it was just 1 because it was smaller, but now it's bigger. So the Senate has the same. Texas has the same amount of senators as Louisiana. However, our representatives are larger because we are a much more populated state. Okay? Now, the 3/5 compromise is dealt with the differences, again, over representation. And it had to deal with the South. Well, the South said, okay, if we're going to go by population, there's, let's say, 2,000 people living in our state. Well, the northern state says, oh, no, you don't count your slaves as people. You said it yourself. They're not people, which we will get to later when we talk about the Civil War. Therefore, they were saying this, therefore you can't count them. If you don't treat them like people, you don't give them the rights as normal, everyday Americans have, you don't give them the freedom to vote or own property, and you treat them horribly, you are not going to get to count them for your representation in Congress. Well, the South said that is so not fair, and they got all upset. So what they came up with was another compromise, and they said that 3/5 of a state's slave population would count towards its actual population. A lot of people think, they said that only 3/5 of a slave count. No. They said they could take the number of slaves that they had. They would say like they had 152 slaves. And 3/5, a little bit more than a quarter of that number, it's about like say 30, 30, they could use that population, the number 30, to go towards the population of the total state. So they took 3/5 of the number of the total population of slaves, and they would use that that number could be added to the number of actual population that they had in that state. Okay? The next one is Commerce Compromise, and this responded to the conflict between the Northerners, who wanted tariffs on imported goods to limit foreign competition, and the Southerners, who did not want tariffs since they depended on selling their cash crops overseas. What is a tariff? A tariff is a tax. Okay? So the government was going to tax things. They wanted to raise money. They had to. They had to pay the soldiers. They wanted to help the farmers. They wanted to build roads and hospitals and schools and fund the government. So they decided that they were going to come up with tariffs. Anything leaving or entering our country would have to pay a tax. Well, the northern states said that sounds like a great idea, because things coming, other countries supplied the North. They supplied us. And they made money doing it because we were a brand new nation. So we needed lots of stuff. So we were getting all kinds of imports coming in from France and Spain, even Britain after the Treaty of Paris, even the West Indies, Africa, all these other kinds of places were sending stuff to the United States. So the North thought it would be a great idea to issue a tariff on these things coming in. Make these states pay extra a tax for their goods coming into our country. Well, the southern states says, no, we don't want a tax on things leaving the country, because the South depended on agriculture. The South was agricultural. We made our money shipping indigo, cotton, sugarcane, tobacco, wheat, rice, flour, all of that overseas, especially to Europe, where they did not have the ability to get these things. That's how the South made their money. So if you were going to tax the South on items that they're leaving the country, you're going to really take away a huge part of their profit margin. So the Commerce Compromise, another compromise, came out that said, okay, we're going to tax goods coming into the country, but not goods leaving the country. And this made everybody happy. The next one is the Slave Trade Compromise. And this was with the Northern and the states were divided again over the issue of slavery. The Slave Ban Compromise prohibited Congress from passing any laws banning the slave trade before 1808. Can you see, guys, how this is all leading up until the Civil War? How all of this is causing lots of tension between the North and the South? The North did not like slavery. In fact, after the American Revolution, a lot of northern states started to outlaw slavery. The South depended on it. So they were fearful that the northern states were going to try and do something to get rid of slavery. So there was a lot of tension. So the slave trade compromise said, hey, we promise not to do anything with slaves until 1809. When 1808 rolls around, it's a whole nother ballgame. And that was known as the Slave Trade Compromise. Next, we're going to talk about republicanism, okay? Let me fix my camera. Now, republicanism is different than what we see as republicanism today. Republicanism today we think of as a political party. That is not what I mean by republicanism. The concept of republicanism was important to the creation of a new government of the United States. It was defined as a concept of limited government with elected officials who represent us and serve on our behalf. Instead of someone who is just like by birth, like King George, who by birth is king and ruler of everything. Under republicanism, the elected officials serve on the behalf of the people and by and for the will of the people. This idea is the basis of this idea, is that only legitimate consensual government is based on the will of the people. And if that government no longer serves the will of the people, we have the right to get rid of it. That's what republicanism, and that's what we did with the American Revolution. We no longer felt that the government of Great Britain and under King George in Parliament was beneficial any longer to us. So we got rid of it. So that's the idea of republicanism, the concept of republicanism. The next two things we're going to talk about are the two political parties, because republicanism was an idea, not a political party. The two political parties at the time were the Federalist, and the Anti-Federalist. So the Federalist supported the Constitution. They believed in having a stronger central government. The Anti-Federalist wanted the states to have more power. They did not want the central government to have that power. So, and that was the big debate. Even kind of like now, we still have political parties that want to have more centralized government power and political parties who want more state power. So three big Federalists at the time were Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. They really were huge Federalists. Big-time Federalists, and they wanted a centralized government. Well, they started writing anonymously, unknowing, no one knew who it was, 85 essays called the Federalist Papers. And these essays were published between October 1787 and August 1788. And it really was a propaganda, and it was used to explain how the new government would work and to convince Americans to ratify this Constitution. Federalists felt that the rights of individuals would be protected by the Constitution once we had in place the separation of powers with the three different branches of government and the checks and balances. The problem was, what the Federalists believed, that the public, the American colonists, did not understand how it was going to work. Well, Alexander Hamilton, for one, was not a very well-liked man. A lot of people didn't like him. In fact, he was assassinated. He was shot to death by Aaron Burr, vice president. For real. So, a lot of people didn't like him. So he wrote these articles anonymously so that people didn't know who they were. Because if people saw that it was written by Alexander Hamilton, they were like, rip that up, throw that away. I don't even want to look at that. But, so they wrote these, and they were anonymous, and they passed them out, and people started to read them, and they said, oh, this makes sense. Okay, this makes sense. So that was what the whole purpose of the Federalist Papers were. Now, Anti-Federalists did not approve of the Constitution. They believed it gave the central government way too much power, and the states and the individuals did not have enough. And they believed that the whole purpose of fighting the American Revolution was to get rid of a centralized government, not to have one again. So they did not like it. They pointed out that by making the federal government have more power than the state's government, the federal government could automatically cancel any state decisions. They were very fearful that the states would not have any real authority. So the anti-federalist decided to support something called a Bill of Rights, and they wanted to add this in the Constitution. And these Bill of Rights would guarantee the rights and liberties of each individual. The Bill of Rights limits the power of the U.S. government. It guarantees certain rights. Rights of, there's the first Bill of Rights. We have the freedom of justice, the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom of religion, the freedom of, assembly, the right to bear arms, the right to, there's others as well. There's 10 of them, and we'll go over them in more detail later on. And let's see, I'm not going to go over the Electoral College. So the next, oh yeah, we're going to go over that next time. All right, so what I'm going to do is I am going to send you another Miss Meyer video. You will be getting it probably on Wednesday. And what you'll do is that's going to be on the second part of the New Nation. So that's all that I've got for you guys today. Remember, things are changing. I just changed up a little bit on how your assessment's going to work this week. You're only going to be taking American History Quiz 4, and you're going to take that on Thursday, okay? So you're not going to be taking American History Quiz 5 because there's so much information on the New Nation that I don't want to give you so much more information. It's just too much. So I had to break it up into one big quiz test issue. All right, if you have any questions, just let me know, and I will see you again on the Miss Meyer Show. So it comes in like these little cat things right here, and I'm talking low because they're upstairs and they can hear me. So it comes in these little caps right here, and it's called poo, and when you take it out, it's this green brown stuff that really looks like poo. And then they give you this yellow stuff that you can add like corn or whatever to it. It's so nasty. So I'm going to be making some poo in my poo-shaped container. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is so cool. Okay, here's my poo. All right, this is your poo thing. And then you close it. Oh, it's so gross. Okay, and then you open it and it... Okay. Take my poopy out. And I'm gonna lay it on my daughter's pillow. Okay, let's go do it. Let me cover up my fake Play-Doh poo because my dog will eat it because he likes Play-Doh. And he likes poo too, so, you know. Alright, so we're gonna go upstairs and go lay it on her bed. Oh, poo broke. I'll tape it and see what she says. Oh! What is the problem? No, it is not.
That's a big one.
What is it? Oh my, all right. Just take it off. Go get a napkin. What is that?
It's poo.
What happened?
Take her poop on her bed. Wait, it's fake.
It's not fake. Go, don't touch it.
It's Play-Doh.
Here, Kate. Just hold it.
It's raining tacos.